We're ready to reconvene from yesterday. Good morning, and I have some logistics to cover before we start our trash amendment workshop. In the event of a fire alarm or another emergency, please proceed to the nearest exit. There's several here in this room. Go out the front of the building and proceed across the street to Cesar Chavez Park to await further instructions. If you need assistance in walking down the stairs, please inform the staff and someone will help you. Welcome to this public workshop for the receipt of oral comments and questions on the proposed amendments to statewide water quality control plans to control trash in surface waters and accompanying draft staff report, including the draft substitute environmental documentation. I am Fran Spivey-Weber. I'm the Vice Chair of the State Water Resources Control Board. Also present are two of my fellow board members. I think that Dee Dee Adama will be joining us, but Felicia Marcus is out of the state, actually, on official business, and Tom Howard is also out of the state on official business. I have Tam Doduk to my right, and to her right is Stephen Moore. Jonathan Bishop is holding fort today. And did you lose Michael?
I said I didn't need a lawyer and I sent him out of the room.
Do you want to introduce our staff?
Assisting us today is Janine Townsend and Courtney Davis, and there is a crew over here that will be helping answer questions and make presentations, starting with Johanna Weston. Raise your hand, yes. Mariella LaPaz, Greg Gearhart, and Bethany Payne. And Michael's back with us.
Oh, well, we had officially decided we could do without you, but I guess you're here, so that's good. This workshop is being held in accordance with the public notice dated June the 10th, 2014, to receive public input on the proposed trash amendments and draft staff report. If you intend to speak on this issue, please fill out a blue speaker card and give it to the clerk located over here. And if you're not sure you want to speak, but you think you might want to speak, put "if necessary" on the card. If you've already submitted written comments to the board, please briefly summarize those comments when you turn in your speaker's card. We will have at least one panel at the beginning after there has been a staff presentation, and I am inclined to allow 5 minutes for each presentation, but you do not have to use all your time. We'll see how many cards I have. If I have too many, or if I have a lot of cards, I'll probably go to 3 minutes. The State Water Board will not take action on the draft trash amendments today. This workshop is being recorded. There will not be sworn testimony, and I will call the speakers in the order that I receive the cards. But I will try to allow public officials and representatives of organizations to speak first. When you come to the podium, please state your name slowly and identify the organization that you represent, if any. And we will start with Johanna Weston, who will present her staff presentation, and she'll be followed by the Trash Public Advisory Group, and then we'll follow with public comments. We probably will take a break, but again, we'll just call that one by ear once we see how many cards there are. Johanna?
Thank you, and good morning, board members and public. I'm Johanna Weston, an environmental scientist in the Oceans Unit here at the State Water Board. I'll be presenting on an overview of the proposed amendments to statewide water quality control plans for trash and surface waters, or shorthandedly known as the trash amendments. The overall purpose of the workshop is twofold. First, to introduce the proposed trash amendments to the board and the public for the first time, and second, to welcome comments, feedback, and questions from both the board and the public. As mentioned in the opening remarks, trying to get this to work, there will be no action taken by the board at this workshop. This workshop is focusing on the draft staff report, including the substitute environmental document, or SCD, for the trash amendments. It was released on June 10th and can be found on the trash webpage under official documentation. This draft staff report was noticed through the Ocean Plan and Trash Plan listserv. Additionally, this workshop is occurring within the comment period for the draft staff report. The deadline for written comments is August 5th, which is the same day as the public hearing. After talking about logistics, let's talk trash. This is a significant pollutant throughout surface water bodies in California, in our streams, creeks, lakes, estuaries, and the ocean. Trash is not just a coastal community problem. It negatively impacts the beneficial uses of the aquatic environment through a number of ways. Wildlife such as birds, turtles, and marine mammals are injured through ingestion and entanglement of trash. Invasive species are dispersed while growing on floating trash. Trash found on beaches and on bottom of sandy sediments can endanger the safety of swimmers or beachgoers. In addition to beneficial use impacts, trash decreases the aesthetics of a community or beach. With these impacts, California communities are spending roughly $50 million a year to combat trash.
500 million a year.
Oh yeah, 500 million, sorry.
Right, that's just money. That's
Yeah.
not all the volunteerism, capital and people's hard work that goes into cleaning up trash as well.
So where does trash come from? Unfortunately, it's from all of us. Trash enters our surface waters from littering and dumping, either directly into the water, carried by wind, or largely via the storm drain system. While pervasive and one of the most recognized pollutants, there are currently no statewide objectives and statewide consistency for trash. Most of the basin plans and the ocean plan have an objective for floatable, settable, and suspended solids. That objective has led to 73 303D listings and 16 TMDLs approved by regional water boards and US EPA. The most notable is the trash TMDL for the Los Angeles River watershed. A solution that we're proposing is the trash amendments. The amendments would be incorporated into the California Ocean Plan and the forthcoming inland surface waters, enclosed bays, and estuaries plan. This project was selected as a board priority project for 2012 to 2013. Before getting into the details of the proposed trash amendments, I want to take a moment to highlight the development process. The trash amendments were first presented in a CEQA scoping meeting in October 2010. Following the outcomes from the scoping meeting, we assembled a public advisory group to assist in the development of the trash amendments. The public advisory group is composed of 10 stakeholders from various sectors, including the environmental community, and industry, and stormwater permittees. From 2011 to 2013, the public advisory group met and provided feedback on the trash amendments at 6 meetings. In mid-2013, staff held 14 focused stakeholder meetings across the state to gain input and feedback from various stakeholder groups on key policy decisions. After the focused stakeholder meetings, we took all the input from stakeholders into consideration and released the draft staff report and trash amendments on June 10th. The proposed amendments are composed of 6 main elements. I'm going to spend the rest of the presentation describing each section of the proposed trash amendments. As proposed, the trash amendments would be applicable to all surface waters of the state, with the exception of waters within the jurisdiction of the Los Angeles Water Board with existing trash or debris TMDLs. However, the trash amendments would direct the Los Angeles Water Board to reconsider the scope of the trash TMDLs to focus its permittees' trash control efforts on high trash generation areas rather than all areas within the jurisdiction. The trash amendments would be implemented primarily through NPDES stormwater permits, specifically Phase 1 and Phase 2 MS4 permits, the Caltrans permit, industrial general permit, and the construction general permit. Additionally, trash provisions would be implemented through waste discharge requirements and waivers of WDRs. The trash amendments propose to establish a narrative water quality objective for trash, where no trash shall affect beneficial uses or cause nuisance. The narrative water quality objective would be implemented through a prohibition of discharge. There would be a prohibition to trash being discharged to surface waters of the state, and this requirement would be present in applicable permits and WDRs. Additionally, there would be a prohibition of discharge for pre-production plastics, commonly known as nurdles, to surface waters of the state. Implementing permits would include implementation requirements to achieve compliance with the prohibition of discharge. The trash amendments propose a framework for permitted stormwater dischargers, where the focus is on controlling trash in areas with high trash generation rates. The trash amendments propose to take a two-track approach to provide flexibility to the permittees to design and implement the best actions to reduce the discharge of trash within their jurisdiction. Based on lessons learned in the Los Angeles and San Francisco regions, the trash amendments focus on 5 priority land uses in a municipality instead of over the entire municipality, and those being high-density residential, industrial, commercial, mixed urban, and public transportation stations. There's a provision for alternative equivalent land uses, and this provision allows for the exchange of a priority land use for another land use that generates higher amounts of trash. For Caltrans, instead of focusing on all road miles, the trash amendments would focus to areas defined as significant trash generating areas. These could include highway on and off ramps, rest areas, park and rides, and highways in commercial or industrial land uses. There's a wide variety of control mechanisms to control trash, and they're divided into 3 categories. Treatment controls include full capture systems, which devices are inserted into storm drains to capture trash as water moves through. Institutional controls, which include a wide range of activities like street sweeping and educational programs. The 3rd category is regulatory source controls, which can be local product ordinances.
Johanna, you've got under treatment
Sure.
controls low impact development. Could you explain really briefly why that's a trash control?
Sure. So low impact development would fall under multi-benefit projects, and those would be both a trash control in that since you're removing the stormwater from the system, and it's not going through the storm drain, it wouldn't be going to surface water, and then we'd be able to have multiple impacts of infiltrating water as well. For MS4 Phase 1 and Phase 2 permits, we're proposing a dual alternative compliance approach, Track 1 and Track 2. Track 1 focuses on the installation of full capture systems for all storm drains and priority land uses. The full capture systems have a set performance of capturing trash greater than 5 millimeters and a design treatment capacity for the same flows as the corresponding storm drain. Track 2 focuses on implementing a plan of any combination of treatment controls, institutional controls, and multi-benefit projects with the same performance result as Track 1. For Caltrans, since they're a linear system, the exclusive use of full capture systems like Track 1 might not be appropriate to implement the prohibition of discharge. Thus, Caltrans requirements would be just similar to Track 2 to develop and execute an implementation plan to install, operate, and maintain full capture systems, institutional controls, or multi-benefit projects. As there are multiple areas of overlap between the jurisdictions of Caltrans and an MS4 Phase 1 or 2, in these locations we would like coordination in trash control efforts. Due to the size of industrial and construction sites, it would be feasible for permittees to eliminate all trash. If it can be demonstrated that complying with the outright prohibition of trash is infeasible, then a permittee could either comply with the prohibition of discharge through track 1 or track 2, and those would be similar to what I had previously described. Compliance for an MS4 Phase 1 and Phase 2 would be demonstrated with the following time schedules. The time schedules have been crafted to provide sufficient time for planning and compliance. Within the first 18 months of the trash amendment adoption, permits could be reopened, reissued, or adopted with trash requirements. If that doesn't occur, then a letter would be issued to permittees requesting the selection of track 1 or track 2. After 3 months, if a permittee elects track 2, then they would have 18 months to submit an implementation plan. Final compliance would occur within 10 years of the effective date of the first implementing permit, and this can't be later than 15 years of the trash amendments, thus giving 5 years for a permitting authority to implement a permit with trash provisions. Similar for Caltrans, with 18 months of the effective date of the trash amendments, an order would be issued for an implementation plan. Similar to Phase 1 and Phase 2, final compliance would occur within 10 years of the effective date of the first implementing permit, and this can't be later than 15 years of the trash amendments. For IGP and CGP, deadlines would be specified in the first implementing permit, and they can't exceed the terms of that permit. During the scoping process, we had mixed stakeholder input and feedback on the options for time extensions. The proposed trash amendments include a provision for board consideration for time extensions to municipalities that implement regulatory source controls. This proposed consideration includes a time extension of up to 3 years per permittee, where each regulatory source control is eligible for up to 1 year of extra time for compliance. The trash amendments propose a minimum monitoring and reporting requirements. Phase 1 and Phase 2 permittees under Track 1 would not have minimum monitoring requirement, instead demonstration of the functioning network of full capture systems in annual reports. Caltrans in Phase 1 and Phase 2 permittees under Track 2 would have a set of monitoring objectives which are intended to provide flexibility to the permit writers to select the most relevant monitoring techniques and expectations for their representative permits. IGP and CGP permits would not require monitoring of trash, but they would be required to report control measures. Just as an overview, this table has a nice summary of Track 1 and Track 2 implementation framework for NPDES stormwater permits, and it's also re-replicated in our draft staff report. So in summary, the proposed trash amendments really aim to establish a narrative water quality objective for trash that will be protective of beneficial uses in California's surface waters. The objective is to focus our limited resources to the areas of highest trash generation to be effective at cutting off the source of the trash to the sea. We aim to provide dual tracks for flexibility and complex adaptive management to reduce the discharge of trash throughout California. The next steps in reducing trash statewide include a public hearing in a little over 2 weeks on August 5th, a written comment period for this draft staff report also closes at noon on the 5th. Staff will then respond to all comments, adjust the trash amendments, and release another version of the staff report and trash amendments. Finally, we will bring the trash amendments back to the board for an adoption hearing, hopefully in fall of 2014. For more information on the trash amendments and the latest and greatest versions, please see the listed trash website. And thank you again for helping keep California trash free.
Are there any questions from board members?
I have so many, I don't know where to begin. let me see if I can just focus it to three sort of general areas. First, let's if you could go to slide 18. Okay. So under track 2, when you say with the same performance results of track 1, what does that mean, and how specific are the provisions, or are there amendments in terms of defining performance results and especially for track 2 as being equivalent to track 1?
So let me jump in and chat about the concept we have with this, is that under track 1 we have a performance-based approach to meeting our the prohibition, and it is that if you install a device that has been approved that captures a 5 millimeter or larger using a 5 millimeter mesh and is designed for a 1-year 24-hour storm event, that you're in compliance. And so the track 2 implementation would be to look at the impacted area that you have that you're capturing for let's pick, just for example, an industrial facility. The stormwater permit control is applicable to all the industrial portions of that facility. You would look at that, calculate essentially the trash in a dry time of year, and then use other controls to eliminate essentially all of that trash that would be equivalent to the capture of a full capture.
And how would someone demonstrate that those other controls, for example, regulatory controls, actually achieve that reduction or elimination of the trash?
So you would be looking at what you have there and estimating the amount of trash, and you'd be repeating that process to look at your capture. It isn't a direct one-to-one that you have some monitoring device that you can use, because you can't monitor trash in the same way. If you're going to monitor what's in the stormwater with trash, you have to actually capture it through a device. So it's an indirect measure looking at the generation and how you control that generation. And that's the approach that's proposed.
It's not giving me a warm, fuzzy feeling.
I think zero, since they're aiming towards zero, if you've got an alternative that gives you 0, it's equivalent to a full capture device.
Yes, but how would that 0 be demonstrated? So perhaps the next question might clarify things for me. What is staff's expectations in terms of the implementation plans that would be submitted for those under track 2? How specific? What are the sort of criteria? And this links also to my third area of questioning with respect to the monitoring requirements. I guess I want a little bit more details in terms of the monitoring requirements and what Johanna just provided.
So our expectation is that that depending on the situation, we're talking here about individual facilities. There's a lot of control on individual facilities as opposed to a municipality. But on individual facilities, we would expect it to be of sufficient detail so that you have a better warm and comforted feeling. It's not prescriptive on what each item would be, but the suite of items would be expected to control trash from that area I'm not saying that the last word is leaving my mind, but also under track 2, we require them to develop, under the permit, has to develop a monitoring scheme to answer certain questions. And those questions include how effective the program is and how you compare that to your baseline. So we are requiring monitoring for track 2. Anywhere where you're not doing full capture, you have to have a monitoring scheme in place, and the permit itself is the vehicle that will be used to describe the monitoring. The policy doesn't lay out exactly how the monitoring would be done, but lays out the questions that the monitoring program would ask. That we felt was more appropriate since we're covering a wide range of different permits with this, and that monitoring schemes are evolving over time for trash.
Thanks. I just a request to those that will be providing comments today. I'd love to hear from your very different perspectives, whether or not the suggested or the recommended language is clear enough to provide you with information you need to develop these plans. I think what we want to avoid is the fetch a rock game, or we will recognize it when we see it. If not, you go find us another rock kind of approach when it comes to these implementation and monitoring plan. Then my final question for now, if you could go to slide 21. And what is staff's thinking with respect to this time extension and why the time extension is warranted or might be warranted?
So I'm going to jump in on this one also. I just can't help myself. So as you notice, this is listed under board consideration as opposed to a staff recommendation, because we've had lots of feedback on both directions and felt that it would be important for the board to hear comments on this issue. The idea is that if you as a municipality or regulatory entity, county or a city, that is, you did a ban of plastic bags, you would reduce the source of one of the components of trash, and as such, that takes effort, time, and resources of the city, and so you would be eligible for an extension of 1 year to recognize all that effort that went into that. And so that was the concept, and that there are multiple things that could have some sort of regulatory source control, so we allowed for up to 3 of them. That's what we want to hear a lot of comment and feedback on from our stakeholders, because we've heard a lot of interest on both sides in our stakeholder meetings, and so we didn't feel comfortable making a recommendation at this point. We will make a recommendation prior to adoption, of course, but.
So another request for those who are making comments today regarding this particular item, I would like to hear from you any information, specifically any data that has been collected in areas where these regulatory source controls have been implemented to show their actual outcomes, results in terms of trash reduction into our waterways.
So I have some questions about the time schedule, looking at slide 19 and how that relates to the time extension, slide 21. So within 18 months of the trash amendment adoption for MS4 and phase 1 and 2, you have to reopen, which is kind of open-ended, so to speak. And that has to be within 18 months. That 3-year extension applies to the compliance period, not the reopener period.
So that would apply to the compliance period, so once it's actually incorporated into the permit.
Okay. And then kind of going back to Board Member Dodek's questions on performance-based, I apologize for coming in late, so maybe you've already done this, but I am curious about what these capture systems look like and how much they cost. Do you happen to have a slide? I see slide 15 has something at the bottom, but I've got, my copy here, so I don't know.
Yeah, there's
How,
not really a great picture, so I won't go back. But there's multiple different types of full capture systems. So there can be a simple put in a screen into your drop inlet, and then it's just taking in the screens would be 5 millimeters in size, and so it would capture trash into that screen, and then the water would continue to flow through it. And those we're estimating on the order of about $800. And then there could be and those would just work for an individual drop inlet. And then there's much larger systems called vortex separation systems, which would be much more expensive, but essentially they're capturing trash from a much wider catch basin, and so from a number of storm drains.
Okay. Do you happen to have pictures that you could access?
So we can get you pictures. So there are lots of pictures of
Okay.
these. We didn't think of bringing them to,
Yeah, I
to
mean,
this. And we'll get you some and walk you through the different types and how they work.
Yeah, that'd be great, because you and I have talked, and I've been looking around, but I'm just not, I didn't spend a lot of time looking around, so
It's not a problem. We'll
Okay.
get those together, and I'll get together with you and walk you through how different ones work and what they look like.
Okay, and then getting to cost on the last slide, in particular for industrial and construction. What can you tell me about how you arrived at these figures?
Sure. This guy's not working. So I might just So we also had a cost considerations portion within our staff report. And these costs were built on reports from US EPA and NRDC, and also from cost estimates from implementing trash TMDLs in the Los Angeles region. So for the IGP, for industrial facilities, this number was arrived at estimating the number of catch basins that could possibly be in a industrial facility based on size. So I believe we're estimating for like a 1 acre facility, there'd be a set number of catch basins, and for different sizes.
So I see that there's a public advisory committee, and noticing that there's not, and maybe through the Stormwater Quality Association, but I'm just not seeing anyone from industry where they'd be represented, representing construction and industrial, and just wondering if you were able to receive input from some of the industry groups regarding the economic consideration analysis.
So we had focused stakeholder meetings with industrial representatives. When we originally put the public advisory group together in 2010, we didn't focus on industrial and construction sites. We were focused primarily on MS4s, and so at that time we didn't include them, but we did have a stakeholder advisory, and we have put all of our methodology for the economic analysis is in our staff report. It's very thorough, and we do expect to hear feedback from folks on that during this 60-day comment period.
Okay. All right, that's it, thanks.
Thanks to my fellow board members, covered my main questions, especially on the monitoring and the outcome. I think Board Member Dodek and I share that desire to gauge the program toward showing the public, measurable outcomes in the waters. And so I want us to have input on that during our workshop. Real quickly, we set up the 2-track system, and I just want to get a sense of how flexible that is, and because I'm envisioning, one approach would be, well, we have some track 1 type work in our catchment or urban watershed, but there's a certain area, land uses that are categorized as track 2 because we're not putting in full capture. How is this going to play out in implementation? Are we going to have the ability to kind of isolate areas in the monitoring and reporting because they're track 1, or does a jurisdiction, just because they don't have all track 1, automatically get kicked into track 2?
So there's a definitional answer and there's a practical answer. The definitional answer is that track 1 for the whole would apply only if you had all of the land uses, priority land uses with full capture devices. But the practical aspect is that if you have a section of your city, your catch basins, sub-watersheds that are all have full capture, they would not need to monitor those sections because they're already in compliance with that section. Only the areas which you can't get a full capture device would you have to then do your equivalence and for.
Okay, good. And at a plan level, I'm comfortable with having some flexibility, but when we get into the permit level for specific permittees, that's where those kind of details really need to be sorted out, I think.
It's most appropriate for each of the permits to take this framework and apply it with more specifics.
Right.
But
yeah.
there is.
I hope to see that, as this evolves, to be very geographically minded, and use GIS type tools to communicate the expectations, to the public and the folks that are dealing with the regulatory program. Thank you.
I just realized that I started to ask questions about the time schedule and then moved on to the time extension without asking the question that I had on slide 19, within 18 months, reopen. So I started to ask the question about how open-ended that is, but once you reopen, where's the requirement to actually take action, prior to the compliance period?
So this is a little bit of a complicated scheme to try and deal with a number of different issues around the state. So what we actually have there are two options. One is that the permit could be reopened and the requirements inserted into the permit, or because there are some permits that are coming up for renewal, and that would make most sense. Or if that permit isn't coming up for renewal in that short period of time, then there's a within 18 months, the regional board or the state board for the statewide permits would ask people to make a selection about track 1 and track 2 and start preparing their track 2 or track 1 plans prior to the reissuance of the permit, so that they could actually be put into the permit in more specificity than general. That allows us to actually include in the permit itself the requirements and not have the permit say, and give us a plan within 18 months, and then reopen the permit to insert that plan into the permit. And so this was a scheme to try and allow the two different situations to happen. The final compliance, as you see, is 10 years after the first date of the implementation adopting permit, but no more than 15 years. The concept there is that our MPDS permits have a 5-year life, so we ought to, within the next 5 years, be able to renew these permits, and then they would have a 10-year compliance schedule from that point.
So you could reopen, if you chose to reopen, reissue, or adopt, and you just reopen and it takes a while to get the
Right.
process going, it could, that's pretty open-ended. I guess what I'm looking for is, what if you choose option number 1 and it just takes a long time, as these often do?
So the controlling factor would be that it could be no longer than 15 years from the adoption of this amendment. That's the controlling factor. And so we tried to give lots of flexibility in how to get there, but we set a firm date out at the end.
Okay.
Now we'll move to public comment, but I have the public advisory group came in early, and I have 3 of the public advisory group who are paper clipped together. So I'm assuming that they're going to be coordinating their actions. And then I have 2 more members of the advisory group who will follow them unless they want to join in the clipped together group. So anyway, we will start. The 3 that I have clipped together are Chris Kraft from the city of Roseville, Leslie Tamanen. No, that's not right. Okay, I didn't think so either. That's interesting. Okay, Chris, I'm going to hold you till after this Public Advisory Committee group has spoken. So I do know, so you will be the first one after that group. I have 4 cards then from the Public Advisory Group: Leslie Tamanen, Kirsten James, and Sean Bothwell. And Miriam Gordon, if she wasn't clipped in, but I'm clipping her in. So, okay. Please introduce yourself and say who you're representing. Thank you.
Good morning. Hello. I'm Leslie Tamanen from 7th Generation Advisors. And on behalf of 7th Generation Advisors, Heal the Bay, California Coastkeeper, and Clean Water Action, we're delighted to be here today to discuss this policy. And having participated in the Technical Advisory Committee over the past several years, we're thrilled to see this policy come forward before the public and before you on the board. And we stand united in strong overall support of the policy. Before I make a few more comments, I just wanted to say congratulations. This must have been very hard fought, and we find it very impressive, so good job. Okay, I'm here also today on behalf of Algalita Marine Research Foundation, which was an original member of the advisory group. Algalita is currently in the North Pacific Gyre, comparing data from 11 stations that were sampled in 1999, 2008, and 2009, with replicate sampling at those same stations in 2014, this year. Ultimately, they're going to merge the existing data from all of those years with this year and additional data in order to evaluate kind of long-term trends in the gyre. We wanted to show you a little bit from the front lines what's going on, more for your interest than anything else. But on July 13th, the boat Algalita spent the night moored next to an approximately 7-ton island of Hyzex brand buoys afloat for 3 years and 4 months since the tsunami. Now, for years, advocates have been trying to explain that there isn't really such a thing as a plastic island in the gyre, but Captain Mort now has kind of a map of a de facto island with a metal anchor 40 feet deep with solid rope beaches that you can walk on and lots of other debris accumulated. And with fish skeletons that are caught underneath, the island is sort of eerily reminiscent of that Life of Pi movie with that poison island. We just thought this was so entertaining we couldn't pass up the opportunity to show it to you. We also wanted to show you a quick, very short, literally, I think it's what, a minute, 2-minute max, video from the gyre taken a few days ago. So they're gonna tee that up. You guys get it going? I heard it without sound. It's really short. Okay, I don't want to take too much time if we can't. Can you get it up? Yeah? All right, if not, we can go to the next slide. Do you want to just put the PowerPoint back up? I don't want to hold you guys up. Okay. While we're waiting, I can actually answer Board Member Dodek's questions about, you had briefly asked about effectiveness of source control ordinances, and we will be discussing our support of time for, source control ordinances, compliance time, later in our presentation, but I wanted to be responsive to your question about some information. And several, for example, plastic bag ordinances have been in effect for a couple of years, and there are some reports showing significant decreases in consumption as well as decreases in litter. For example, the Washington, D.C. 2009 bag tax reduced usage by approximately 50% to 70%, and part of the revenue helps clean up the Anacostia River. Large stores covered by LA County's 2010 10-cent charge reduced single bag usage by, plastic bag usage by 95%, and paper bag usage by 30%. Since 2012, the city of San Jose has reduced litter from plastic bags by 89% in the storm drain system, 60% in the creeks, and 59% in city streets and neighborhoods with that 10-cent charge. The city of Los Angeles has just implemented its bag ban and has reported already anecdotally, it's not up on their website yet, compliance and some decreases. So there is significant data out there, and we will submit it as part of our written comments demonstrating that these source control ordinances, just one example, plastic bag reduction, are very influential and actually do in fact reduce litter. Okay, are we ready to roll? Yeah? Again, this is from this week. There you go. So that's just a little trailer or teaser for what I'm sure Captain Moore will make into a longer video, but it is very time real. So we thought you'd be interested in seeing his perspective that gyre pollution is definitely increasing. All right, moving on. Is the slideshow back up? The video itself kind of makes it a little slower. Okay. Well, I can start talking about this before we get to the next slide, but you have a lot of information, and we will be submitting. Here's just another pictorial example of recent pictures of urban litter. You also have some information, and we will be submitting more. Can you advance the? Sorry, technically lame here. About trash impacts on the environment and on California's economy. We know this has been extensively documented from the complete administrative record of the LA River trash TMDL up through recent regulatory hearings for single-use plastic bag bans and for LA County, LA City, and other places. And we will submit references to our original material from those hearings and specifically incorporate more material in our comments. But we think facts such as these three little ones, for example, highlight why California needs a trash policy. The first bullet is actually from a very new report released June 23rd, 2014. And it's aimed at businesses, interestingly enough, but it put pollution, the impact of marine pollution at a natural capital cost of at least $13 billion. And this number even excludes things like the impacts of microplastic and the effect of hazardous chemicals once in a marine environment. So from an economic standpoint, it's imperative that California come up with a leveraged solution like this trash policy. Litter cleanup, we know from the recent CURE report that was mentioned previously, cost Californians at least $500 million. And plastic litter, we know, has harmed over 663 marine species without belaboring the point. Again, it's high time we have this policy, and we look forward to now going through in a little bit more detail our questions about it. Thank you.
Good morning, Kirsten James with Heal the Bay. Many of you know that Heal the Bay performs beach cleanups, and we actually do over 500 each year, both in the beach areas and the urban areas of Los Angeles. And so we've realized that education, while it's a piece of the puzzle, it's not going to solve the trash problem. We've experienced that over the last 30 years of doing these efforts. And so we've realized that we need to look at these creative regulatory solutions like TMDLs, and we need to look at the source control solutions that we've been talking about in order to really get to the bottom of this enormous problem that Leslie helped to quantify. Just to speak to the question about the source control incentive, as a member of the PEG, we believe that this is a very creative, clever idea. We'd like to spend a little more time with your staff talking about details. While we support the concept, we want to make sure it's equitable for those that have been proactive at doing source control measures, as well as those who haven't really done anything to date. So we're supportive in concept, but want a little more time to talk through things with staff and see where we can come out on that. But we think in general it's very innovative approach to apply to track 1, not to apply to track 2. So Heal the Bay, as I mentioned, really sees these regulatory approaches. Oh, does that, okay, stop.
Go back.
Mm-hmm.
What I thought I heard you said was your in general support. When you say incentive, is that the time extension?
Yeah.
For track 1, but not for track 2?
Right. I mean, as we see it, track 2 is would likely comprise of these types of solutions in order to meet their goal. So we wouldn't want it double counted. So perhaps it could, we'd have to think innovatively of a way if it could apply to track 2 and not be double counted. But, if quantitatively a municipality is showing that track 2 is going to reach the same volume reduction as track 1, which is something I'm going to talk about in a little bit, we want to make sure that this goes above and beyond that, if that makes sense.
Thank you. That was an interesting nuance that didn't convey.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Many PEG meetings later, I've thought a lot about it. So as we mentioned, the regulatory approach, has been seen in LA. We have 15 TMDLs there. Heal the Bay has been involved since day one, helping to develop these innovative TMDLs